Hello everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and what I want to talk about today is being offended and offending. I think people on both sides often get overly sensitive about this, okay? It's not just the people being offended who are being overly sensitive, but it's the people offending that are being oversensitive. And I don't think it's necessary if you put things into context. So if you're the person being offended, realize that the reason you're offended is because with something that someone said or did kind of hit against your sensibilities. But realize that the sensibilities of everyone else is not identical. What triggers you doesn't necessarily trigger someone else, and they don't know upfront what's going to trigger you. Okay? And that should be, we should strive to be okay with that, okay? Because people shouldn't have to feel that they're walking glass with every word they say, but at the same time, you should be able to express that something bothers you. Go, hey, you know what? What you just said, that bothered me. I know you didn't mean anything by it, but in the future, you know, when addressing me, can you please avoid that language? Nothing against you, just, meet me halfway, okay? In the sense that ask for that courtesy if it's not already being shown. Vice versa, if you're the person who did the offending, what happens is that you get defensive because you think that when the person says, I'm offended, that they're automatically assuming that you only must have said that with some sort of bad intent. So you're assuming that they're casting judgment upon you by being offended. So you get defensive. You're saying, well, I didn't mean that. Why would you think I meant that? No one means that. You know, why is everyone being so politically correct? That's not necessarily the point either. It's not necessarily that you're a bad person for saying it, nor does the person being offended think you're a bad person for saying whatever you said or did. They're just bothered by it, and that's okay. In the same sense that you said it because you thought you were trying to express yourself, and that's okay. Okay, not everyone grew up in the same context and learned to communicate identically. Okay, that's just reality, and that's always going to be reality. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily, just because you should feel comfortable saying whatever you want to say, it doesn't mean you shouldn't want to kind of show people courtesy and be sensitive to, what may bother them. Okay, but do you necessarily need to be worried about upfront being like, okay, before I say anything, is there anything that's going to bother anybody? No, not necessarily. But if someone says, hey, that bothered me, be like, okay, sorry, won't say it again. Move on. Everyone moves on with the conversation. Not a big deal. This does not have to be, and again, this is not about whether you have to or don't have to be sensitive to others. Whether you're the person being offended, meaning try to not be offended so much by people, or you're the person doing the offending, meaning try not to offend people so much. That's just a courtesy. It's not an obligation on you, nor should you have to. That is sort of the problem, and that is a very legitimate issue that we're seeing on college campuses and a lot of educational, where there is kind of this thing where they're making it punished, where you do kind of have to walk on glass when you say. So you can't learn. Okay, part of how you learn to communicate with people is by making mistakes, by bothering people, and people telling you, that bothered me, and then be careful of saying that in the future, and that's fine. It's like anything else in life. We learn from our mistakes. Problem is, in a lot of campuses, they're making it so hard, they're punishing you so much for making mistakes that you're scared to make mistakes, and it does get to a point where you're scared to talk, and that is a problem. That needs to be avoided. But again, the problem isn't that people shouldn't be offended, and the problem is it should be okay to be offended, and it should be okay to not be offended. It should be okay to offend, and it should be okay not to offend. You should do whatever you want, okay? Now, if you choose to be sensitive to others, that's a courtesy. And a courtesy is good, okay? It's good to show courtesy to others. It's how you get people to show you a courtesy back. But if you make people feel scared that one mistake is going to cause them all this grief and stress, then they're not going to talk at all, and they'll never learn how to speak better because no one was able to say, that may be not the best way to say that, because the minute they made a mistake, everyone pounced on them and said horrible things and cast deep judgments. And that's why you're having this frustration that's sort of turned into the alt-right. There's this economic frustration from globalization, from automation, etc., that, really hit a particular middle class segment in the past, and the children of that middle class segment, and at the same time they're feeling frustrated, and on top of that, whenever they try to express themselves, they're feeling judged, and that frustration has as starting to become hate and anger, that's you're starting to see sort of the worst elements of the alt-right. I'm not saying the whole entirety of the alt-right, but the worst elements of it. And vice versa, on the left, it's when you see things like the BLM, the Antifa, whatnot, then there you have a mix of those who do want to kind of create this sort of militant anti-speech type of thing. Again, that environment where you can't learn from your mistakes. But at the same time, you also have an element of people who also didn't have an opportunity to speak out because people told them, you can't complain about that. That's not something to complain about. That's not something that you can't express your frustrations, and that's turned to hate and anger. So we need to tell people it's okay to complain. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. We all are about something, okay? And sometimes when we communicate that stress and that frustration, we don't necessarily blame the right causes, and that happens on both sides, okay? Yes, ideally, a lot of this stuff could be broken and disseminated away from sort of collectivist constructs and whatnot, but some people think that way. But if people can't express their anger and frustration, that anger and frustration turns into hate and violence. So we should welcome that discussion. Let people say things that may bother us, and be willing to say things that might bother others, but always, attempt to have the courtesy to try to learn where those lines are so you can manage it better. So I'm sure I probably pissed off everybody on all sides with this video, because most people generally want to believe that their anger and frustration is the only legit anger and frustration. But it's not whether it's legit or not legit, it's about whether people are listening and people feel like they're being heard. And if we're too busy focusing on what we heard instead of what someone else said, then we're just going to keep growing apart. We're just going to keep getting further divided. And that's not a good thing. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page. Thank you very much.